Good afternoon, everyone, and hello to the first day of summer. Welcome to our summer solstice lunchtime offering of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency 4-hour course with hands-on labs, CDM 220, CDM and Federal Mandates, how to use the CDM Dashboard to enable automated BOD 2201 reporting. My name is Joe Bukovac, and I am part of the Cyber Training branch of the CISA Cybersecurity Division as the CDM Dashboard Training Lead. Today, the training goal is to provide you with the basics of CDM and using the CDM Dashboard capabilities to efficiently use the BOD 2201 requirements to reduce the significant risk of known exploited vulnerabilities. We want to provide you with your agency with improved cybersecurity, with numerous CDM resources, references, and lab scenarios so you can maintain your skills in this changing environment. We are excited that during today's presentation, we will have two CDM guest speakers for you. Now, before we get started, I would like to introduce today's instructors and share some disclaimers. Today, we have John and Mike as our instructors. John Stufflebeam has 15 years of experience in cybersecurity course development and instruction. John has supported the DHS CISA CDM training program for over 6 years. He has served in the United States Navy, where he performed systems integration and combat information center tactical team training. Mr. Mike Jansen has over 20 years of experience in the field of cybersecurity and has supported CDM and various DHS and CISA training and awareness programs for 10 years. Mike is retired from the United States Air Force. Now, a few disclaimers before we get started. Today's course is being recorded live through WebEx. There is no dial-in for this session, and audio is in listen-only mode. CISA and DHS does not endorse, recommend, or favor any commercial product or service mentioned during this session. The use case data in our demonstrations and labs is simulated, and no production data is used for demonstration and training purposes. Additionally, please note the following sensitive information disclaimer. Be aware that this CDM Agency Dashboard training event is live and is being recorded and may be made public for the benefit of other students. Events such as these are attended by people from many different federal agencies. As a student, please do not disclose any agency sensitive information or personally identifiable information in the chat during this event. Speaking of chat, CISA has a commenting policy addressing the rules of behavior regarding chat during virtual trainings. Everyone's input during the class discussion is vital in making the course a better learning experience for everyone. The CDM training team now provides 12 hands-on virtual courses, live in-person trainings in Arlington, Virginia, with our next in-person courses being held the week of July 22nd. So please register if you're in the DC area. We offer dozens of new and updated microlearn videos that are currently available on FedVTE and self-paced training options. Additionally, you can now find CDM training dashboard videos on the CISA YouTube channel. If someone you know would like to be added to our training membership list, or if you have training related questions, please send us an email at cyberinsights@cisa.dhs.gov. At the conclusion of today's course, you'll be asked to answer a few survey questions, which will be in the virtual learning environment. And this is where you'll have the opportunity to provide your course feedback. We value your opinion, and your comments help us as we continue to update this and all our CDM Dashboard courses we teach with the most relevant information. Thanks again for attending. It is now time to begin our journey into CDM, federal mandates, and the BODs. And I'd like to introduce Mr. John Stufflebeam, who will begin today's presentation.
Hey, Joe, this is Mike. I'm actually going to start us off today. Thank you for that.
You sound a lot like John, so okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the introduction.
Sure.
and welcome everybody. Good afternoon or good morning or good evening, wherever you might be dialing in from, but glad you're here with us for the CDM 220 mandates course, the automated reporting for BOD 2201, and we're going to cover some other stuff as well, other BODs. So yeah, looking forward. But before we kind of get into it, we always have our administrative stuff. If you are not familiar with WebEx, I'm just going to hit this really quick because we've been using WebEx for a while, and I know a lot of y'all have probably come to our other courses, but just in case you haven't, if you do have any audio issues, just you can see on the top left of the slide here. If you look down at the bottom where the mute button is, the very bottom of the screen, if you click on the up and down arrow, it'll pull up your speaker and your microphone, and you can make sure that you have selected the right speaker. Microphone won't matter because we have everybody muted, and there is the audio settings there as well that you can go in and just make sure that everything looks right. I will point out that seems that a lot of individuals have issues with coming in through the web, but if you use the WebEx app, so we definitely recommend downloading the WebEx app. There's a lot less issues. Through the web seems to have some delays in audio, and when we're switching slides or different things, there's delays. So just make note of that. If that happens, that's probably the reason why. So definitely check into getting the app. And so throughout the course today, we'll try to get ask you some questions and get some interaction. And when doing so, we'll ask you to raise your hand or give us an emoji. And down at the very bottom of the screen, you can see the little hand gesture icon and the reactions, the smiley face. Let's go ahead and click on the reactions, and if everybody can just throw up a reaction for me so we can give it a try. I'll do the dirtle. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for that participation. So yeah, we'll do that here. Yeah, I know nobody likes all this administrative stuff. So in the chat panel, you see that you're able to either send a message directly to an individual or all the panelists, or so just be careful when you're sending messages. Multimedia viewer, if you need closed captioning, that's where you would go to implement the closed captioning. There'll be a couple of prompts, and then no information that you have to input, just select OK. And if that multimedia viewer doesn't pop up for you, at the very bottom right of the screen, the three dots, the ellipsis, click on that and pull it up. So I think that's all we need for this. So let's get to our objectives. All right, so this is what we hope that everybody comes away with from the course today. So cybersecurity mandates, policy and directives, they come from many sources, and this course is going to feature the BOD 2201 and 2301 as put forth by CISA. But there's other sources of federal mandates and directives, and we're gonna take a look at all those. During the class, we'll also take a look at the directive creation process. We're going to cover some of the relevant mandates that relate to cybersecurity, and we'll use the CDM agency dashboard to help look for vulnerabilities related to those mandates. All right, so that's the plans there. We like to start off with just some acronyms in case you're new to CDM, new to this whole process here, new to the federal government. There's some acronyms that we might mention throughout the training today, and this is just to make sure we're all on the same foot before we get there. Sometimes we might forget to actually pronounce it out, but so in the event that you are new, yeah, just take a quick peruse through these. I'll just hit on a couple, but first one being that top one, AIM, asset inventory metric. So this metric is used to determine automated KEV reporting. Let's see, ED, emergency directive. We have EDR, endpoint detection and response, the KEVs, known exploited vulnerabilities, ZTA, zero trust architecture. And the ZTA is a design that supports zero trust principles. No user, system, network, or service is trusted. Again, I'm not going to go through all these, but just to remind you that in the supplemental doc section in the CVLE, for those that attended our tech check, you remember there's a supplemental doc section. That's where you can get a glossary of a lot of these terms. So, all right, well, with that, I'm going to hand things over to my co-instructor, John, and we're going to get, you know, he's going to give us some background on the whole policy creation process. So over to you, John.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, let's take a look here. So policy and creation timeline. So, I'll try to make short work of the next few slides, but I do want to cover some things because I think it's interesting that some of these policies and directives that we deal with every day don't necessarily come from Congress or the Office of the President. There's other folks that weigh in on it as well. So let's take a look at how these mandates and directives figure in with some of these institutions. All right. So the first one here is the legislative branch. And, we all know from our civics class that the legislative branch is responsible for passing laws. And you can see here on the slide some of the committees that are kind of key to any kind of cybersecurity legislation. But the more notable being Homeland Security in particular. These ideas, not everything becomes a law. Some of these ideas, very well turn into legislation, but they can also find their way to an agency where it comes forth as an agency directive. Okay. Some of the legislative actions of late are the FISMA, where everybody's familiar with FISMA, the National Cyber Protection Act, and the Secure Technology Act. So those are just a few pieces of legislation. All right, let's take a look now at the Office of the President. Okay. The President issues presidential directives or executive orders. I think everybody's probably familiar with EO 14028. While we won't get into the specifics, just kind of suffice it to say that is your role of as a member of the executive branch. Think of the president as the CEO, and you're going to heed a memo from the boss. That's kind of how it plays out. So, with the president, Office of the President, again, different types of directives and executive orders can come from there. All right. So, Office of Management and Budget. OMB, Office of Management and Budget, is part of the Executive Office of the President, and it oversees the performance of federal agencies, and it administers the federal budget. So we got the money folks involved now. So agencies also submit their annual FISMA reports to OMB. That's where your FISMA reporting ends up. Okay. And then some of the more recent memos released by OMB include things like 2201, which provides guidance on the adoption of endpoint detection and response. That's a kind of a big piece of the Executive Order 14028. And then also M2209, which for those of you that are in the throes of implementing zero trust, M2209 is all about zero trust architecture. All right, next we have NIST. I think everybody's probably familiar with NIST as well, National Institute of Standards and Technology. And these folks fall under the Department of Commerce, interestingly, but they baseline information security plans and procedures, and they also recommend types of security systems and software, and they standardize the risk assessment process. And again, I think everybody's familiar with NIST, but Special Publication 853 is really kind of the bedrock of cybersecurity controls. Special Publication 800-137, which deals with continuous monitoring. Okay, so and then probably one of the more recently released special pubs is 800-207, which again deals with zero trust architecture. All right, next we have the National Security Agency, and they're responsible for national security systems in general, and so pretty much when they come out with something, needless to say, those policies and procedures carry weight. So we don't hear much from them, but when we do, it's typically pretty important. All right, Government Accountability Officer, GAO. Okay, now the GAO is, you may hear from these folks from time to time, but technically the GAO falls under the legislative branch. Okay, and GAO is responsible for tracking all of the rules in the federal government. That's kind of a broad statement, but they basically keep an eye on things. Okay, and they'll study the actions taken from agencies and provide those to lawmakers with their findings. Okay. Now, for example, ED 2101, which dealt with the SolarWinds vulnerability. That was summarized in a GAO publication, and I'll put a link here in the chat for you, so you can take a look at it if you want. Just pop this in here real quick. Okay, there we go. And that number at the end, that is the GAO number to locate this particular report. And basically what it does is it documents the federal response to the incident. So, there's not just SolarWinds, but pretty much everything gets reviewed by the GAO at some point. All right, next we have the GSA, General Service Administration. And this is interestingly an independent organization. It falls outside the jurisdiction of the three branches of government, but the department head is a presidential appointee. Okay? And the GSA provides management and administrative support to the entire federal government. And it also establishes acquisition vehicles for agencies to use. And GSA also administers the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, or what we know as FedRAMP, okay? Which and that's all about the use of secure cloud-based services in government. So they are in charge of FedRAMP. All right, so that takes care of most of the agencies that are out there, agencies or departments that are out there that have anything to do with cyber, directives and that sort of thing. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Mike, and he's going to tell us a little bit about CISA.
Yeah, thanks, John. It was a good recap of all those. But CISA, that is, we're all familiar. That CISA works across the public and private sectors and is the operational lead for federal cybersecurity. They take care of all things .gov, right? And they're also the national coordinator for critical infrastructure. So CISA, they're also the ones that are responsible for issuing the BODs and EDs. A BOD is in case you're not 100% sure what it is, but it's a compulsory instruction to all federal departments and agencies, and an emergency directive that is issued by the director of CISA to, goes out to all departments and agencies, and it's more kind of directed at a specific problem or issue. I'm going to go ahead and post a link in here as well. And that's where you can kind of see all the directives. But we're actually going to dive into BODs and EDs a little more. But I have a question for y'all. Do you know what the difference between a BOD and an ED is? If you can post that in the chat panel, that would be great. And yeah, we're going to talk more about it. See if you know. Give you a second. Anybody? Thank you. Got a response there. EDs are critical issues that require immediate mitigation. All right, let's just get into it. So, all right, a lot of information on this slide, but so BODs, they are issued to safeguard federal information and information systems and to mitigate activities that have timelines attached and are important, but maybe not urgent. BODs can be more long-term, and they don't apply to national security systems. They direct agencies to implement incident reporting, FISMA reporting, mitigation of risk, and other operational requirements as determined by OMB or DHS. Thanks. I saw several responses come in. I can see why it took a little bit. There's some good responses. But yeah, it looks like y'all got the gist there. And so that was BODs, EDs. Yeah, they're directives that the director of CISA issues to mitigate current threats and to help immediately reduce the attack surface. They comply with the procedures and NIST standards and guidelines and are, again, they're more immediate short-term directives, whereas the BODs are not as urgent. So you can see there's a little, that each one on the slide that's listed on here and what the requirements are for agencies. The Secretary of DHS is authorized to develop and oversee the implementation of BODs. Federal agencies are required to comply with DHS developed directives, and these directives, they don't apply to statutorily defined national security systems, nor to certain systems operated by Department of Defense or the intelligence community. So cyber directive types, we have 3 different types: risk-based, which is more reactive, and these are meant to safeguard federal information and information systems from a known or suspected threat or vulnerability, or if there's a risk that needs to be addressed immediately, then yeah, that's the this one. So these are referred to as responsive directives, or directives that address a current threat or vulnerability. Another type of risk-based directive is an escalation directive, and these are meant to elevate CISA or interagency responses to steady state or enhanced operations, or to escalate slow, inconsistent, or inadequate responses. We have strategic. So risk-based was reactive. Strategic is more of the proactive, right? Getting ahead of it. It's meant to advance strategic priorities related to the implementation of cybersecurity capabilities or other operational requirements, and to enhance the federal cyber baseline and associated operational approaches. Then the last directive is procedural, which addresses procedural or administrative requirements for agency reporting. So cyber directive application, and there's different types of scoping for directives. A directive might be warranted if there's a threat, vulnerability, or risk that applies to a specific audience, or has a specific application, or if it affects all FCEB agencies, FCEB being Federal Civilian Executive Branch, in case you're not familiar with that acronym. I don't think we listed that one out earlier, but there are also agency-specific applications where there's critical risk that may affect other agencies. And then lastly, there's system-based directives for things like HVAs, high-value assets, and impacted device types posing a significant risk. So different applications. Now a little bit on the process here. So this is a high-level look at how BODs and EDs basically come to being. This isn't shoots and ladders game. So starting out, after the threat is identified as a persistent, widespread threat, a draft or pilot directive is drafted, and then after it gets tested, successfully tested, the directive then gets published to the agencies. Now, during mitigation, CISA coordinates and assists with action plans, and when mitigation is complete across the agencies, validation and assessment follow to ensure that there is a higher bar is being set. So, but with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to John to talk about the legislative timeline.
All right, thank you, sir. Let's take a look at a little bit of history here. So, now that we've discussed where these mandates and directives come from, let's take a quick look here at where we've been. These are just a few of the laws and directives and mandates that have gotten us to where we are today. And as you can see, we've been legislating cybersecurity for the last 50 years, and with the Privacy Act really being the cornerstone of that legislation. That's kind of what kicked it all off. So let's take a look at a high level of some of the acts and mandates that might be interesting, so you can understand why some of these BODs and EDs have to be mitigated. All right, so I mentioned the Privacy Act. It's really the cornerstone legislation because it basically states that if the government is going to collect information on you, they have to tell you, and then they have to tell you what they're going to do with it, and then they have to keep it reasonably safe. Okay, and I'm doing a lot of paraphrasing there, but that's basically what it says. So, as I mentioned, the government has to take reasonable precautions to protect it. Okay, so this was 1974, which we really didn't have any computers in place at that point, at least not to any great extent. Okay, so the Computer Security Acts of the 80s, those ushered in repercussions for federal computer crime. Okay, because we're starting to get into the information age here, so we have some of the first legislation dealing with misuse of systems and computer crime. And it required federal agencies to take measures to prevent unauthorized access to computers, particularly those containing sensitive information. And this is actually, these laws established NIST as the authority for developing standards and guidelines for federal computer systems. So NIST has been at it for a while. Next, we have the CFO Act of 1990, which basically says that we need to modernize the government's financial management systems and strengthen financial reporting. So once again, the money folks get involved. Simply put, it draws the money and the funding into the picture. And then lastly, we have Klinger-Cohen in 1996, which essentially revamped IT acquisition for the federal government. It required agencies to assess and manage risk of IT assets, and it also established the Office of the CIO to help ensure that these requirements are being met. All right. Now here's one that we're all familiar with. Okay. FSMA 2002 and 2014. So FSMA 2002 superseded many of the computer laws that we just talked about. And it created a lot of new specific security responsibilities for agencies to follow. And FSMA came about through the Homeland Security Act of 2002, which also created the Department of Homeland Security. Okay, so all that came about around 2002. And then in response to the number of cyber attacks that the federal government had been experiencing, we modernized that act to FSMA 2014. And it basically codified the Department of Homeland Security's role in administering the implementation of information security policies for FSEB agencies. And this legislation provides DHS the authority to develop and oversee the implementation of binding operational directives in coordination with OMB policies and practices. All right, so let's take a look here at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Act of 2018. This act created the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. Okay, so it created a whole new agency, and it made it the primary gateway for cybersecurity information sharing between the private sector and the federal government. And legislation and directives can be passed from DHS through CISA to the agencies. So basically, they operationalize a lot of this legislation, which is why we need to make sure that we're following the guidance of BODs and EDs. So that's a little bit about the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Act. So with that, what I'd like to do, I see that our first guest speaker is on board with us. So I'd like to introduce Ms. Judy Baltensberger. And Judy is the project manager for the CDM Dashboard effort here at CISA. And she oversees the development and implementation of the CDM agency and federal dashboards. And I just want to welcome you, Judy, and thank you for taking the time out to join us this afternoon. I know you always have a busy schedule. So with that, I know you have a great dashboard demo for us, so I'll turn it right over to you.
Hello, can I make sure everyone can hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, perfect. I was going to share my screen. Let me make sure. Can everybody see a window?
We see dashboards with a list, some colored boxes on the left.
Perfect. Okay. So what I wanted to share with you today, and I not knowing which agencies all of the audience is from, what I wanted to share with you was what is coming with our release ES 6.2.1. And I wanted to give you heads up on our roadmap. So ES 6.2.0, we're deploying that to our DBAS agencies right now. I believe the SIs have it in their labs and they will be scheduling the standalone deployments. I don't have those schedules memorized because there's about 90, actually, there's more than 95 agencies now. We just had another one join, and the acronym is like NIGC. It's one of our small non-CFO from Group F. So we're well into the 90s on agency dashboards, and I don't have all of their schedules memorized because they're spread across multiple teams. But what I wanted to let you to know is here in May, we released ES 6.2.0, and I was going to go over some of the changes that you're going to see with that. I also wanted to let you know that we have a content pack, ES 6.2.1, that is coming in June. And then we're working on a patch that is coming out, ES 6.3, in the middle of July. So what you can expect with the 6.2, which you're going to be seeing on your dashboards here shortly, is probably the most obvious thing is that we have removed the legacy directives dashboards. So what I'm going to show you, if you can see here on the screen, this is our sandbox. So I'm showing you all basically simulated data. So you can see inside here, the legacy dashboards would start with an L. You notice here we have removed them. This is our sandbox. So we have a lot of other dashboards that various individuals have created so that they can basically see what the new versions are being built, and they're predominantly here within our PMO. But what you can see is the legacy dashboards have all been removed. So what we're focused on for our configuration baseline dashboards are going to be the agency dashboard. We have the CDM enabled threat hunting dashboard. Another baseline is going to be the directives dashboard, the FY24 FISMA metrics dashboard. You'll notice this one changed and we added FY24 to the beginning, and we have our health reporting. So those are all going to be our standard baseline dashboards. That's probably the first thing you will see. The next item I wanted to point out is under directives, which I'm going to go click on that right now, because what we are going over is directives. So the new directive that you are going to see, and I realize this is overcome by events, but as these come out quickly in a rapid response format, we eventually add them to the baseline. So the new one that was added is ED 2203. For those of you that remember, that was when we were mitigating the VMware vulnerabilities. So the reason we add these to our baseline is because we want to be able to go and periodically make sure that once you have remediated the binding operational directive or the emergency directive, pardon me, we want to make it easy for you to go back and make sure that you have truly institutionalized within your organization a process to ensure that you're managing these moving into the future. So you can see we have binding operational directives going all the way back to BOD 1602 and Emergency Directive 2002. And the reason that we did this is for a couple of reasons. Like if we were to go click on, say, BOD 1602, if this is related to a particular network infrastructure device and a patch had been implemented back in 2016, but now you have accidentally forgotten to save a configuration, you've rebooted that device, and now that patch is no longer implemented on that particular device, we want to be able to quickly go back and see that. Because what we'd like to do is operationalize that you're monitoring these vulnerabilities, particularly for ones related to BODs and EDs, and that you have a mature process that not only fixes them when we have the threat at targeting us, but then also that you have a mature enough process that you can go back and make sure when you lose power and devices are rebooted, or if you have another instance where new devices are being onboarded to your network, did you actually patch everything and then evaluate to ensure that it was at a certain security posture before you actually added it to the network. So you can see here, we keep all of the old ones, but what I wanted you to notice is that ED 2203 is the one that we added. Right now I'm clicking on dashboards and you can see a list of all of them here. Another item I wanted to point out is the high value asset dashboards. So what I'm going to do is go back to the agency dashboard. And from here, I'm going to click on dashboards. And the reason I've chosen to do this is because you can see all of our HVA visualizations. So we worked with the HVA PMO, and what we wanted to help them do is find a way for them to continuously monitor HVA assets. So what you're looking at is a visualization at your agency dashboard so that you can see the exact same type of information that they were looking for. So the HVA PMO wants to be able to look at hardware assets. They helped us design this set of visualizations to focus on hardware assets, HVA software related to HVA assets, misconfigurations related to HVA assets, and vulnerabilities related to HVA assets. But what's really important to understand is that how we are identifying these HVA assets is actually through their system boundary identification and through the assignment of an HVA label on both a system boundary and an asset itself. So what we need agencies to do, and this is where I'm hoping you take this as a takeaway from this class, is that once ES 6.2, the patch, is deployed at your agency, please go in and open up these visualizations and start to understand whether the system boundary has been captured appropriately, because where the system integrator gets that information is actually from you, the agency. So your naming convention, how you're identifying your system boundaries as they relate to the FISMA accreditation and how you're tracking your ATOs, it's very helpful if you're giving the proper label to the system integrator so that we're labeling it properly inside of the dashboard, so that when we help the HVA PMO run their reports, they're looking at the information the same way you are, and we're all speaking the same language when it comes to context, and that we understand the system boundary ID as you have named it, the system boundary name as you have named it, and then if you have an HVA system ID, are you using the exact same HVA ID that you have coordinated with the HVA PMO, and is that the same identifier? So a lot of teams have exported external spreadsheets and they're tracking in external spreadsheets. The goal is to modernize beyond the external spreadsheets and get all the information inside visualizations and dashboards so that we can understand your assets, what software you have, and any associated vulnerabilities and misconfigurations with those. So looking here, you can see what we've organized. There are some lens visualizations in Kibana, and there's a saved search down here below that lists all of your hosts and how they're organized by system boundary and system name. And if you can take a look at that information and ensure its accuracy, if it is not accurate, I please ask that you work with your CDM PMO POC and the CDM system integrator, and we make adjustments to make this information accurate and represent how you're communicating with the HVA PMO. That's my biggest takeaway. Also, jumping to the other screens to just give you an idea of what it looks like. This is a query of software. It is all filtered on just what HVAs that have been identified. Please note this is all simulated data, aka fake data. But at the end of the day, you can see the software findings associated with system boundaries and HVA IDs. We also have misconfigurations, and we also have vulnerabilities. What's interesting about vulnerabilities is we're not only tracking total counts of vulnerabilities, we're allowing you to focus on high and critical vulnerabilities, which are questions that HVA PMO is going to be asking you. They're also very interested in how many open KEVs you have and how many of those are unique open KEVs. For your awareness, they're going to be taking that information and then looking into the POAMs and trying to understand how long those POAMs have been open. So for your awareness, once these visualizations are deployed out in the field and you're using them this summer, we're scheduled to meet with HVA PMO in the fall this year, and we're going to start adding some enhancements to these visualizations so that we can move to that next level of understanding which KEVs are associated with POAMs and have those POAMs been open for more than 12 months, and what is the root cause for it being open? Is it because it relates to an end-of-life software product? Is it relating to a specific configuration that is a known vulnerability, but because of the version of operating system you're running on, and this particular misconfiguration is related to a configuration that would break the functionality of that particular HVA? They want to understand where those problems are and what the prevalence is. And so by each one of these visualizations being aggregated up to the federal dashboard, we'll start to be able to see prevalence across all of the FSEV agencies as they relate to the HVAs. And then we'll see trends across certain software products, trends across certain misconfigurations and vulnerabilities. And then we can start to understand, are those being targeted by threat actors? Because the other CISA analysts that are going to be looking at this, they have access to other threat intel sources that give us an idea of what threats are actually being targeted by the various different actors and advanced persistent threat groups. So please take a look at the KEVs that are high, critical, and known exploited. These are the visualizations that the HVA helped us put together. So now you understand what they're going to be looking at. We've told them that this version is being deployed in the summertime. So the goal was to give you 60 to 90 days to look at it yourself, start to understand where there might be data quality issues related to system boundary ID, system boundary name, and the HVA system ID. If there are discrepancies, I encourage you to please reach out to your CDM POC and your system integrator, and let's try to get those resolved before the fall timeframe. Because in the fall, we're going to start trying to relate this information to POAMs, and we would like to be more accurate and precise, particularly when questions are being asked on why something has not been remediated in a timely manner and why we still have exposure to that risk. So then moving on to the next big area that we are changing is, as many of you know, we have, and so what I'm doing is I'm actually jumping over, this is our production federal dashboard. what I wanted to share with you is that every week, if you are not a member of the CISA SOC call, I please encourage you to join, and I can share that information with the training team and they can make that available to you. But what I wanted to let you know is that we on the dashboard team attend that SOC call. So what that means is that we're finding out what software products, vendor product versions are they looking for, a prevalence across the federal civilian landscape. Also, what specific CVEs they are looking for. And what happens is during that meeting, information is shared about particular threats targeting these vendor products and versions. Also, it brings up which CVEs are being targeted, and it also talks about known exploited vulnerabilities. So as that is happening, these custom rapid response dashboards are being created by the dashboard CSOT team. Once those are created, they are posted here on our federal dashboard. The reason I'm not going to click on any of them is because it will actually be sharing specific vulnerabilities associated with the agency. And so out of a courtesy, I'm not going to put anybody on blast and share what the actual real world event is. But these rapid response dashboards, what we want to be able to do now is, in the past, what we were doing is we were sharing these as custom saved objects out of band. What I mean by that is we were making them available to your system integrator, and then they were uploading them into your agency dashboards. This was taking too long, so we wanted to make this process much faster. So we have built an automated mechanism so that when these rapid response dashboards are created, typically within 24 to 48 hours after the SOC call that is every Thursday between like 1 and 2 o'clock, these dashboards are created. We have a process that within 72 hours, preferably by Monday morning, these custom shared objects will be disseminated from the federal dashboard where they're approved by a federal employee on the dashboard team, and they will be pushed down to your agency dashboard. They will sit inside of the agency dashboard on your agency dashboard. The benefit of it being in this automated process is, one, we have already organized the queries, both of the lens visualizations and the saved searches, in the format that the CISA analyst is looking at. So we are sharing with you the exact method in which we are looking for the information, collecting it via cross-cluster search. We're making that available to you so that you can view the information in the exact same way that we are. You're getting the same fields that we're looking for, the same filters that we're looking for. You're also getting the same saved searches that we're looking for. The hope is that when we do find something that needs your attention, and CISA analysts, whether it's JCDC, capacity building, directives, cyber insights, whichever team from CISA reaches out to you, because we have given you the exact same view that they're looking at, you can pull it up on your screen. And then if there is confusion over which host or IP address is the actual root cause of where this vulnerability is that needs to be fixed, you should be able to find it with the same ease, because we've given you the exact same visualization that they are looking at on their side. So with that being said, there is a new process. These are created at the federal dashboard. They are typically created within 24 to 48 hours after the SOC call on Thursday. The goal is to have them automatically approved and then automatically disseminated down to your agency dashboard so that by Monday morning, you should have these. And if you are getting calls from any analyst across CISA, whether it's JCDC or capacity building or the fight team, you're looking at it in the same way that they are. Some of the background behind why we wanted to automate this was, in the past, these dashboards were being done in a custom space by your system integrator. They were also being done in custom spaces by our system integrator. The reason we were doing that is because every time we did patches and updates, we would overwrite the baseline. And now what we are doing is we have matured our process to the point where we're incorporating these customizations and we're moving faster to merge them into our baseline. So the code that is the baseline agency dashboard that you get every time there's a release, content pack, or a patch, we're now merging these rapid responses into that faster. To be blunt, we're being more agile. As we do that, we're incorporating them in. Therefore, it's not going to be overwriting in the baseline spaces. We now have it all organized, and we're not going to be wiping anything out or accidentally deleting anything. So that operation maintenance patching type process that we had in the past, we have now matured that to the point where we can share these with you quickly. And the goal is for you to know how to identify the problem as quickly as possible and then remediate it as quickly as possible. And we want you to be able to see the same view that we see. So that is custom objects and how we're going to be sharing them faster. And so the next thing I wanted to show you, I'm going to jump back to our agency dashboard. So now we're back in our sandbox. And what I wanted to share with you was a couple of other changes we have made. So in the FY24 metrics, there are some areas that we have updated. And I am pulling up my cheat sheet so that I tell you all the changes that we made. Okay, the first item you're going to see that is different is inside the FY24 metrics. You'll notice that the navigation menu bar has now moved to the bottom of the screen. What happened was when the Elastic version updated, the floating navigation bar broke during our last patch and upgrade. So what we've done is we've pinned it to the bottom of the screen. So if you're looking for that menu, please look down here on the bottom. So one of the visualizations that is changed is here under implementing IPv6. So what we have done is you can see the metrics for 5.1 through 5.4. This gives you the breakdown of IPv4, IPv6, and dual stack. What we're doing now is we have this implementing it across, and so it's organizing each one of the agencies, but then in the columns, it's telling you the quantity of your IPv4 as compared to your dual stack, as compared to your IPv6, with a percentage of how much across your organization. We also have unknown. The goal there is that we want to be reducing that down to 0. It's good. Here in the lab, we're at 0. I can tell you out in the real world, we are not. So the goal is to track down all of those unknowns and get them tagged and labeled appropriately. 2 new columns you can see here on the end is what is the total count of IPs identified across the metrics 5.1 to 5.3 and the total count of 1.2.4 to 1.2.7. The goal here is these need to be the same number. If they're not, then we have discrepancies in our tagging that we need to go back and track down. So you'll notice we changed that. Then we metric 8.4, just a sec. So here in metric 8.4, just a second. Users can visualize the time to remediate, and you can also use the date range here. We have our control filters for agency, device, and system boundary. Oh, another thing you can do here is notice remediated KEVs here in the middle column. Let me check and see. So those would be most of the highlights for the FY24 metrics. We had a couple of bugs that we fixed, and a couple of the other enhancements actually were all behind the scenes. What I've shared with you is all of the front end user interface changes. A lot of the other changes on the back end had to do with how we send the information to the indices, what IDs we're using, and updates to a couple of our pipelines. Oh, I forgot to show you guys BOD 2301. 2 seconds, I'm jumping back to that one. So in BOD 2301, as many of you are aware, this has to do with the amount of reported assets that received credential scans within the last 14 days. So what's important here is that we are tracking both credentialed scans, just ever happening, but how many are current within the last 14 days or not current within the last 14 days. So you can see the high level here above. The color code red is because they're falling below 50%. This is all fake simulated data, and we wanted to show errors when we were doing our test of all of these user stories. So that's why all of these are red. But notice the breakdown for when was the last time a host was scanned, a vol scan was done. The updates were actually made to this visualization here with credentialed vol scans. So how many of them were scanned, how many were scanned within 14 days, and then you can see the percentages here on the right. And so those would be all of the updates I had to share on the agency dashboard. For the federal dashboard, literally the only thing that changed was the HVA dashboards and the FY24 FSMA metric dashboards. So we did have those done in both places. And there's no point in showing you because they're literally the same thing. The difference is they just have multiple agencies, but I'll jump to that here now. So I'm in the FY24 FSMA metrics. I'm in a fake simulated sandbox of the federal dashboard. So as I told you before, the navigation menu has now been pinned down to the bottom. So we updated, here we go, implementing IPv6. If the federal dashboard would have multiple agencies, but here on our sandbox, we don't have more data than one agency. And what was added was all of these columns, particularly the two on the end. With smart patching, that stayed the same. You see how all of this looks very familiar? So the federal dashboard is just a clone of the agency dashboard, the difference being it shares multiple rows of information because we're using cross-cluster search. And I'm going to jump to the federal dashboard. Where was federal? Oh, there we go. And notice we have the same HVA dashboards. Misconfigurations, vulnerabilities, devices, software. So let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Let me jump back, and what I did want to share with you real fast before I jump off is what is coming with our next two releases. So just for your awareness, with our next content pack, we also have some new capabilities where we are pulling data from our other CISA partner solutions, and we are making that data visible down inside of the agency dashboard. So what's exciting is we now have cyber hygiene data. So in ES 6.2.1, we're going to be able to share cyber hygiene data. I've already told you about the HVA data. Oh, we have mobile asset vulnerability reference data that is coming. And then later in July, we're going to be doing a patch. This is going to be only for the federal dashboard, and we're going to be making the sci-high reports visible at the federal dashboard and the agency dashboard so that all of our CISA partners are going to be able to see that. And then the last thing I wanted to share is that we have an effort to improve our software matching. So as many of you know, let me scroll into software. We have been pulling CPEs for quite some time. As many of you know, the Common Platform Enumeration has not done a very good job of helping us understand, does everybody recognize a CPE? It's this big long string with colons in between. So what we've been doing is parsing this out and creating something that we call Vendor Product Version Update Edition, VPView. And so this CPE ID that's not applied consistently across all of our layer A vendor OEM product implementations, we need to be able to run these queries to quickly find operating systems, vendor names, product names. One, so that we can understand prevalence across the network when we're trying to find a vulnerability associated with that software product. Additionally, we're also trying to use it to find end-of-life software. So we've created something inside of Elastic called a synonym. So if we were to go back up here and look for, say, a Microsoft product, you're going to see that it shows up with multiple different naming conventions, which can be frustrating. Did it go? Here, 2 seconds. Let me go to Discover. So what I'm going to do is go look for things called Microsoft. Do we not have? Oh, sorry. I clicked the wrong thing. I have CPE in there. Just a sec. Here in 2 seconds. Okay, there we go. I was trying to find what words they had used. So see how MS could be a version of Microsoft. What we're going to do is create a synonym so that all of these aliases that are assigned when we collect and scan using all the different tools that we have across the CDM tool solutions. Sometimes the data is coming from Qualys, sometimes it's coming from Tenable, sometimes it's coming from Microsoft SCCM. Well, not all of them are using the same name. So for the example, if the Layer A tool discovered it and reported it to the dashboard as MS, but we want to be able to search on Microsoft, then what we're going to do is take that synonym and apply it inside of these indices so that when you go search for Microsoft, you'll find everything that is related to Microsoft. Because what we've done is we've created an index of all the synonyms and aliases and all the different ways that all the Layer A tools discover these various products. So that is being deployed in ES 6.2. It's a pilot, so we're only deploying it at 5 agencies first, and we're evaluating the impact on the Elastic solution and whether we need additional Elastic licenses in order to support it. But I wanted you to know that yes, it is coming. Yes, it's being deployed at 5 pilot agencies, and we're evaluating the performance of it. If it works out and it's effective, then we will be deploying it to all 90 plus agency dashboards. So with that being said, I was going to stop sharing. And are there any questions?
So far, no questions, Judy.
Okay.
I didn't see anything pop in while you were doing the demo.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Well, if
All
you're
right,
good to
well,
go, thank you for everyone's attention, and I'll see you at the next one. Take care.
yeah, thanks so much, Judy, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Okay. Bye now. Enjoy the rest of the class.
All right. So great information there. All firsthand stuff and all of the latest stuff. So we're always excited to have Judy with us to cover all of that. At this point, I'm going to hand it back to Mike, and I think he's going to get us started on maybe some current mandates. Mike,
Yeah,
I'll hand it off to you.
We're gonna. Thank you, John. So we're gonna get things out of order a little bit. I have up right now Lab 1 exercise, but we're gonna roll past this, and we're gonna get into current mandates. So just real quickly on this particular slide, we're gonna kind of talk a little bit more about these as we go, but this is a few of the current mandates. Judy hit on a lot of those, but we're gonna really focus on the BODs, 2201 and 2301. And to help us with that, we have another guest speaker today, Mr. Dave Otto, and Dave is the risk management SME for the dashboard effort, and he's here with us to cover a little bit about the current BODs that are out there. So, Dave, thanks for joining us today, and I know you as always, you always have great information to share with us on the whole risk management process and BOD. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Dave. Thank you so much again for joining us.
Okay, good. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I do always regret in this class that, or this course, that given the format, we don't really get to interact other than in chat messages. I've already dropped my email and a message in the chat, so if there are any questions, if you desire any further interaction regarding risk management or measurement or what I talk about today, please feel free to reach out to me. So I like this course because it provides you with a certain level of tactical detail. Judy just went into some specifics on the dashboard, but it also tries to tie it to, I think, the strategic imperative. And I'm going to argue that from a business perspective, from an operational management perspective, that kind of integrated or coordinated operations is going to deliver the most value. And obviously, the value we're looking for is a hardened attack surface, less risk, or an appropriate level of risk, because from my perspective, there is no such thing as zero risk. What there is ideally processes by which we determine what is our acceptable level, what's our tolerance for risk given our mission, and what from that, what's the appropriate spend on that. So in that idea of proportionate approach to risk is really embedded. It's enshrined in the risk management framework. We're not asked to solve every problem. We're not asked to produce a zero risk environment. We couldn't afford it. We cannot. Question I like to pose in this discussion is if I have a $10 double eagle gold coin from, I think they were from 1918, and the face value $10. Would I put $10 of protection around that? Would I put that in my little change bowl on top of my dresser? Well, no, probably not, because when I last looked, probably 10 years ago, that $10 coin was actually worth $5 or $6 million. So I would probably keep that. I would insure that. I would have that in a safe deposit box, or I would build appropriate protections around that, and versus a $10 bill, which I don't want to be careless with it, but I don't want to lose it either, so I keep it in my wallet, in my pocket. So our approach to risk management, FSMA, I mean, in many ways, FSMA can be read as a accounting act, and that's, I think, really its roots are in just a basic accounting of IT investments, and of which security is a facet of protecting that investment. And from the beginning, the risk management framework, the slide you're looking at, the risk management framework has envisioned that we set strategy, we set risk appetite. Now, I should say, notions of risk appetite, risk tolerance came into it a little later, at least using that particular wording or taxonomy. But strategy would be set at the organizational level, and modern organizations should have a risk appetite and a risk tolerance. And that can be as simple as, and it really is a very simple approach to saying, I have very low tolerance for the loss of privacy information. I have very low tolerance for loss of confidentiality, for business critical information, etc. So a policy at that level is kind of abstract, aspirational, but it would flow down then to the level 2, the mission business process layer. And in most organizations, that's where your security policy is established for your agency. So security policy might take the idea that I have very low tolerance for a loss of confidentiality with privacy information, or I have very low tolerance for loss of confidentiality or loss of availability in my HVA systems. And those types of strategic statements are turned into security policy, where there would be very specific that if you have an HVA system as defined by, you shall apply or that system shall be, adjudicated at a certain level, or it should be assessed to be a FIPS 199 high, or it should have a NIST 853 high baseline applied. You might have those kind of policy statements, or you might simply have policy statements that would direct that, when you have a certain type of situation, this particular enterprise control might apply here. And then obviously at tier 3 level, that's where we would take that security policy, and that should be really embedded seamlessly into tools and configurations and practices, so that we're carrying out the strategy from level 1, the policy from level 2, and it's showing up in our tools and tactics and approaches at level 3. And now here's for me where it gets interesting. That part is fairly straightforward. I think it's the next part where we get into a little bit of trouble, because the risk management framework has always pictured that the results that flow down on the right side flow back up on the left side, so that in a perfect world, it'd be kind of like a thermostat. At the top level, I change the thermostat it's a hot day out there, so we might want to go from 74 to 72 with our thermostat. Now, I've made that kind of strategic direction at the top, and maybe at the top is as simple as saying, could you make it cooler in here? And so at level 2, all right, let's turn the thermostat from 74 to 72, and that happens. But what are the results of that? Do we know? Did it in fact get cooler in here? How does that information make it back up to level 1 and level 2? And so it's always been a challenge so the data of compliance, the data of cybersecurity doesn't scale easily. The results don't do anything of their own accord. They don't know who needs to see it. They don't know where to go, and in what format. And so the way I put that, or the analogy that I've used for years, when I was first kind of tackling a problem like this, I was actually 13, 15 years ago at the Department of Justice, and we were deploying BigFix, which we called ELMS, the Endpoint Lifecycle Management System. And we all of a sudden found ourselves with a gold mine of data, but really hadn't planned fully what we were going to do with that data, how to treat it, just what was there and what to make of it. Because it's not like data comes to you wrapped in a bow, saying, all right, here's the story, here's the data, and here's how it correlates to other things, or here's how it correlates to your policy. None of that is automatic. None of it comes wrapped in a bow. You have to plan every bit of it. So I was kind of tackling that problem, and it was the dead of winter. My family had just moved here from a warm climate, so I had teenage children who were complaining it was cold in their rooms. And as an engineer, my first thought was, well, I need a bigger blower, need a furnace that's turning out more BTUs, and so forth. So someone come to the house, and it took him about 2 minutes to suss out by looking in my daughter's bedrooms that clothes and books and stuff, sitting on the air registers. And he made a statement that kind of it's always stuck with me, that hot air is lazy. It's not going to go anywhere of its own accord, and that even a piece of paper sitting on top of that register would inhibit airflow and make the room cooler. And I was like, data is lazy. Data doesn't move anywhere of its own accord. Data does, the results we get at level 3 are never naturally going to matriculate up to level 2 and then up to level 1. We have to be very deliberate in how we plan that and so forth. So I'll wrap up this slide by simply saying that this is very desirable, that we have a good flow from strategy to policy to tactics, if you will, to execution, but that we need to be very deliberate in how we are planning those results. How do we communicate those results? Do we send all the data back up to level 2 and level 1? Should we be talking detailed configurations, detailed CVE, CVSS information, or should we find ways to intelligently kind of abstract that information and communicate it in an appropriate business level, so that if my policy, if my strategy at level 1 might have 5 or 7 items, the biggest, most if we measure organizations in terms of revenue and size, and we look at Nvidia or Apple, organizations like that, in terms of their enterprise risk management, they might have 5 things for cyber that are actually being reported up at level 1. And identity, attack surface, there could be a few other strategic initiatives, risk assessments, how many are we doing? But you don't report everything. But you do have to be consistent in how are we using level 3 telemetry, results information, and how are we abstracting that into the results. So that kind of sets the stage for how I believe we're looking to approach these things. We're not just trying to, when we put out a BOD, we're not just putting it out there as here's another compliance for issue for you to chew on. And we're just adding to your stack of work. Ideally, BOD 2201 can be used to actually streamline and make your workflows more efficient, because what 2201 does is say that out of these 200,000 things, these couple thousand things at this point, I actually don't know what the count of actual KEVs is today, but there's a lot of research out there that would suggest that there are between 4,000 and 5,000 CVEs that are actually exploitable. And everything else is good information. I'm not going to say it's noise. It's not noise, but there is a good deal of noise in that catalog too. But of this 200,000 things, don't try to tackle it all. Don't try to drink out of that fire hose. Instead, sip out of this KEV catalog, deal with these things. And from a strategic approach, again, don't just treat this as compliance and this extra thing we have to do. This is an opportunity for you to embed this in your strategy. We're going to take a risk prioritized approach to patch management. We're going to use the KEV catalog, and there are other products, by the way, that would help you with the task of prioritizing, and some of them are, FireEye, for example, had only a very small number of things for the federal government that were their highest criticality. And I think they had some categorical problems in terms of that wasn't nearly enough in terms of what we're actually contending with or facing from the adversary. But if you have a product that was telling you to focus on these 50,000 things, The research doesn't really support the idea that there are that many critical items. So traditionally, a lot of operations went by the CVSS score. If it's a 10 or a 9 or an 8, deal with that immediately on the network. And that was a good approach given the information we had available. I would argue that KEV improves on that so that it's not about the CVSS number, although I wouldn't simply drop that from your tactical approach. I would say that first up comes KEV, and we have very low tolerance for KEV on our network, and that could be from the strategic level one, just a basic strategy statement, a very low appetite for KEVs on our network. That absolutely is a signal of a attack surface that's not under control. So at level 2, I would embed into my policy that we use KEV to prioritize, and I would put some time in. Well, KEV, the bot itself sets some time frames, but I would embed that in your security policy. I would then at level 3, I would make sure that your patch people are aware. Now there are certain platforms that are embedding, KEV, so I don't even have to look at the dashboard if I'm on an operations team. My tool might tell me that this is a KEV, but there should be clear signal from policy to that level 3 team, operations team, whether they have the dashboard or not, that deal with KEV first and deal with it quickly. Second, from a maintenance perspective, if it's not KEV, but it's a CVSS 8 through 10, deal with that in a timely fashion. So if KEV is 7 days, maybe CVSS is 8 to 10 is 30 days. And then what do we do with the rest? Are the rest just unimportant? No, because they do constitute a kind of control creep if we don't deal with them, but we could deal with them on maintenance intervals of, whether that's 90 days or 6 months. That's up to your agency's risk appetite. But again, I want to talk about these KEVs, not just in terms of compliance, but in terms of the opportunity to embed that in your strategic, your policy approaches, and ultimately your tactics at the tool and the operations level. And then also the opportunity, as I talked about, the deliberate things we can do with results and data. That information, that's a good use case for the dashboard, because now I can report my KEV results, my patch results, in a way that is conformant with my policy statements, conformant with our strategy, and we can really start to close that loop between strategy and results and reporting in a way that should be minimally, there should be very little friction in that, actually. I mean, we do the work, we get the results can roll up into a report, and the worst thing is maybe our CISO isn't on the dashboard, but as an ISO, I am, and I have an easy way to extract that data, send it up, and this is our standard report for how we perform on patch management. Now, maybe you have 10 different measures of patch management and not every one is in the dashboard. And, that's okay. The reality is we're dealing with hybrid environments. Sometimes we don't have a single pane of glass, but as much as possible, we can consolidate that picture. And I would argue that in terms of reporting up to level 2 and level 1, we want a very abstract picture. I shouldn't be sending up 10 different metrics of patch management when my performance on KEVs, my performance on CVS is high critical, and that longer term maintenance picture, that could be 3 metrics that would provide a very robust picture, perhaps, because I don't want to over prescribe the idea that that's enough in every scenario. But that would be enough for a lot of agencies to say, here's how we're performing on hardening the attack surface. And so use the dashboard to produce your key indicators. Now, 2201 obviously has been out for a couple years. Everybody, I would hope, is familiar with it at this point. I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty other than to say it, created responsibilities to CISA. It created responsibilities and asks of the agencies. And again, if we go back to the idea of a risk-based approach to security, these are the no kidding things that should be dealt with when these are active. And I still get in discussions with people who kind of want to dispute that because in a way it's conceptual. Like, well, we like CVSS, we like what it tells us. Well, cool, but I can show you objectively, quantitatively, that there are CVSS 10s out there that actually cannot be exploited. They're not exploitable, not currently. Um, if according to, I guess, theory or taxonomy, if you will, a CVSS5 should not be remotely exploitable. And yet we see some that have been. So that's why I think that this approach of looking at what is actually being exploited, what is actually exploitable, is great for prioritizing our efforts. And in case I haven't convinced you yet, I will give you another anecdote that in roughly probably 2014, so 10 years ago, I hate to even say that, it ages me, but I had a team from Carnegie Mellon, SEI. We were going to try to, and this was related to the FISMA metrics at that point, we were going to try to, I guess, deconstruct a number of OMB memos and NIST special publications to identify just how many requirements are there and what would it be like to try to measure. And they went through a couple memos and I think one or two special publications, and we had like 1,500 discrete requirements, and we stopped the project at that point. And that was what we learned from that. We can't do everything. We can't do everything that's been prescribed to us to do. So in that, how do we take prioritized approaches? Well, one is to prioritize our identification of risk internally or impact, and we do that. HVA is a very good way of doing that. A lot of you may be in agencies where the FIPS 199 process, your general counsel for your agency said, well, if it doesn't involve loss of life, it can't be FIPS 199 high. It's like, okay, well, that is an interesting approach to prioritization and risk and impact. But when we have huge data stores of both privacy and in some cases actually mixed privacy information, healthcare information, and that's not being protected at a high level or it's not thought of as a high value asset, that's a gap. And I'm not saying anything. I've actually had this conversation with Ron Ross from NIST. He agreed. They felt that they needed more tailoring for a lot of approaches with FIPS 99 and value. So you have the opportunity with the high value asset approach to identify those things that might not fit into FIPS 199 high. And by the way, further anecdote for you. When we got the initial list of HVA assets from the government, from all the entities in the government, there were actually 1,500 items in that initial list that were listed as kind of top priority items. And when we further broke that down into about 110 items that were, everybody agreed, these are the crown jewels of the government. Less than half of those were protected at a FIPS 199 level. Now, that's significant because you've got subject matter experts and people with local domain knowledge in the agency saying, this is a high value asset, this is a crown jewel. And in a lot of cases, those particular systems are directly supporting either mission essential functions or national essential functions, and yet they were not protected at a FIPS 199 high level. And we as operators have to kind of put some realism around that and say, well, no, we really do need tailoring. We need efforts to actually apply greater protection. So that's one way of prioritizing. And then another way of prioritizing is something like the KEV program, where we can take that and say, all right, I know what my HVAs are. I know, and I've got the least amount of risk tolerance for those systems. And so I might want to be very aggressive in saying, with an appropriate level of due diligence and testing, we want to patch these systems very quickly. We do not want attack surface exposure to those systems. And so if my if my time interval for a regular system or a moderate system is 14 days to patch, I might say 7 days. I might say 2 days. I know when they were developing the KEVs, they wanted almost 0 day. They want it now. I would argue, and I did then internally here, I would argue with you to you, or I would pontificate to you, that 2 of the biggest outages I've ever seen were caused by the security operations team pushing patches. One was because there are such things as poison patches. Microsoft pushed one in 2006 or so, and I know there have been others. And then I saw an outage at AT&T Wireless that was, I mean, after extensive testing, a patch was pushed and it did something unexpected and took everything down for about 4 hours. So don't be in such haste. Your policy should direct this. Don't be in so much haste that you push a poison patch without testing. Do your due diligence and engineering, but act in accordance with your risk tolerance, your risk appetites. Okay, so that's what I'm going to cover for BOD 2301 on this page. And okay. So 2301, and I misspoke on the last one, but we're clear on the KEVs. 2301, is that going back and forth? So 2301, your actions is that, so what we found was we go out with the KEV BOD, and then through a series of engagements, and as we learn more about actual practices in the agencies, we still had operations where, well, we only scan every 45 days, or we only scan every 90 days, and we only patch every 6 months. And I'm well aware that if you are using mainframes or certain flavors of Unix, that 4 months, 6 months cycle might be what makes sense operationally. But with Microsoft, as the adversary has gotten better, and by the way, the adversary will continue to get better. And I mean, if you're keeping track of the artificial intelligence conversations, we can hypothesize. We're not necessarily seeing it yet. We are seeing deep fakes and things like that and how that's affecting security. And we're seeing instances where a very sophisticated spear phishing attack, that spear phishing email might have taken 40 to 80 hours of resource time for the adversary to have produced, and now they can produce that sophisticated spear phishing email in minutes using AI. But what we can reasonably assume here is that this is going to make low skilled adversaries better. all the time. And so we have to up our game in terms of dealing with that low skilled adversary and the fact that they're getting better and faster. And when we're only scanning every 30 to 45 days, when we're only patching every 3 months, 6 months, that's not adequate. That's not going to keep up with that adversary. And so 2301 directed that you need to be doing vulnerability scanning, discovery every 7 days, enumeration, passing that information up 14 days, needed to be able to initiate an automated ingestion. In other words, if an emergency directive came down and said, we're seeing the 0 day, please scan now, there needed to at least be the functionality or the ability to make that happen. And it wasn't necessarily the tools that were the issue. What we saw were contract issues. That, well, my contract says that my vulnerability management people only need to scan every 40. We only bought scanning at a 45-day interval. And so those issues need to be worked out, again, from strategy to policy to tools and operations. And so basically 2301, if going back to KEV, good, excellent, actually, one of the more proactive moves I've seen on the part of the government in a long time. And then I think 2301 was a really good addition in the sense that, okay, if we're going to do that thing, we're going to need to do these other things operationally to make that work and provide the most value. So again, if your contracts are inhibiting you, you need to be, ideally, you're working with your core, your acquisition people to embed that. And also, you can use the dashboard in that instance to direct that we're looking for a certain level of performance. We're looking to be better than average, or we're looking, putting a hard number on things is sometimes a challenge, but to be able to say that we're going to look to maintain a certain level, and for our HVA systems, we're looking for an even higher level of performance. We're looking for an even more hardened attack surface. Those things can not only be directed in policy, they should be reflected in your contracts, your performance plans, and throughout. And then 2302 it's out there. It's about hardening management interfaces. This came obviously as a in reaction to a large incident, and is good. Is a critical approach to security. Anybody who's worked around the DoD may recall different initiatives where, on a certain day certain, you are to shut down certain ports and protocols, or extraneous ports and protocols. And so to be able to have this come down strategically, where it's kind of no kidding, do it, you can then embed it in policy. And once again, you should be able to measure that in your dashboard, have the results flow up without friction, to be able to report on your strategic, progress, or your strategic objectives. So that's what I'm going to cover on that one. What is expected of agencies? Ensure your accuracy of data in the agency dashboard. This is going to become, I believe, as we move towards zero trust, which is data driven. You cannot even begin to do zero trust without a data foundation. And if I don't understand the quality, reliability, sufficiency of my data, I'm kind of dead in the water. You can't have, and this goes towards, if you look at the DoD reference architecture for zero trust, there is obviously a, SIM, SOAR, artificial intelligence, machine learning, And all those things are going to rely on good data. The transaction at the point of a user trying to do something is going to rely on good, timely data. So we're going to have to take data stewardship very seriously and have the means to test our data quality, monitor our data quality, and be good data stewards. In order to scale a solution like that, it'll have to be automated. We're going to have tools to do that, but we're going to have to become adept at the use of data. Data exchanges, maintain current agency dashboard version, use integrated product team, IPT structures to ensure success. That's because these are complex integrated solutions. You need likely an IPT approach. Manage the CDM program within the CIO or CISO office using an IPT structure. Provides input to inform requirements, and I don't need to run through the rest. I think it's very clear. So that would be the agency responsibilities here. All right, going through AIM very quickly, and then I'm kind of running over. I got a little too talkative there. So AIM is the asset inventory metric. If you're not familiar with it, we did this with the KEV program to try to understand when is it okay to use automated data? When, because again, you can't just take, oh, there's data, so that's good. We're good. Because if I'm only actually looking at 30% of my assets and that's telling me I'm 100% compliant, well, I'm not. I'm actually only 30% compliant. I need to be able to know that we're looking at a sufficient amount of data to trust the number. So that's really what this was, is that how many devices do we have in CDM over how many devices have you been reporting in FISMA? And ideally, those numbers ultimately match, that we've got a good count of data coming from CDM. And if we don't, we're actually taking the steps to get those numbers, conformant or matching. So that's the AIM metric. We are actively looking at, I'm initiating a project right now where we're going to do some outreach, talk to security operations people, and we're looking at, what would advanced AIM metrics look like? And we talk asset management very broadly, but if we break that up, maybe asset discovery in and of itself is a functional activity. So anyways, we've got the AIM metric and open to hearing any feedback from people in terms of how they think it could be improved upon. What would an advanced asset management metric look like, and what would an approach look like? If you're sitting there on, you've figured that one out, or you're actively trying to figure it out, feel free to reach out to me. I'd like to have a discussion with you. We're always interested in learning from the community. The BOD, this was related to AIM and the BODs. I'm not going to really go through it in terms of ingest because it has changed from time to time, and that team, the directives team, will send out directives as appropriate in terms of reporting windows. And I'm actually going to stop here because of time. But Mike, can I pass it back to you?
Yes, sir. Hey, thank you so much once again. Great information. I love the visual imagery through your how you describe things. I want that $10 coin.
I would love one myself. If you come upon one, I'm happy to share it with you.
And I would have all kinds of protections around that for sure.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. I know you gave us more time than what we were thinking, so thank you for doing that too, Dave. Really great information.
All right, thanks everybody.
Have a good one. All right, so with that, we have just a couple more slides. I know we're probably want to take a break here shortly, but I think we're just going to push. We have a couple more slides, and then we're going to get to the labs portion. So With that, I'm going to hand it over to John to kind of finish the rest of the way out and get us to the lab section. So, John, can I hand it over to you, sir?
Absolutely. All right. So Dave went through the AIM metric, and this is just kind of what it looks like here in this table. You know, the automated reports, or the CDM automated reporting reports weekly to the directives team. Now, officially, it's only supposed to report every couple of weeks, but they're doing it weekly. They've got a little API set up that is able to ingest and transfer the data. So, and it sends that CDM data to Cyberscope on the status of the KEVs. So now agencies that don't meet the 80% threshold, they're going to be expected to manually report their status of KEV findings through, you know, to CISA via Cyberscope manually. Now agencies are going to be expected to engage and work with CDM through the program review process, which is outlined in OMB M2205. And that's to identify and resolve any gaps or other issues that might be preventing them from fully operationalizing their asset management capability. CISA will work with requesting agencies to provide technical and program assistance to help resolve any issues or gaps, you know, optimize scanning, you know, and also support, you know, to reach out or to reach requirements in the BOD 2201. Now for BOD 2301, agencies report through Cyberscope or an approved process outlined in M2205 at the 6, 12, and 18-month mark. And that's after issuance of the BOD. So we've pretty much initiated some of that reporting already. So let's look at some of the reporting details here. Okay, so again, 6, 12, and 18 months after the issuance, FSEB agencies need to provide CISA, and this would be through a reporting interface like Cyberscope, a progress report to include any obstacles, dependencies, or other issues that may prevent them from meeting the directive requirements and the expected completion dates. Or they need to work with CISA through the CDM program, you know, the review process, which is outlined in M2205, or if there's superseding guidance, I think it's still M2205. But we want to identify problems that agencies might be having, right? And, you know, that might be preventing them to fully operationalize their asset management capabilities. So basically, this means that, you know, we want to make sure that assets are being reported to the dashboard correctly and accurately. All right, 14028. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. You know, have you heard of the President's Executive Order 14028? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay. Here we go. We got some thumbs coming in. All right. So some have, some haven't. All right. No problem if you haven't. This will be just a little brief overview. In recent years, persistent and sophisticated threats to public and private sectors have prompted the federal government to improve its efforts to protect against and respond to cyber threats. Now, the executive order outlines 6 key points that you see here on the slide, and those cover a broad range of topics like information sharing and zero trust architecture, supply chain security, a federal cyber review board, kind of like the NTSB, and then better incident response preparedness and improved remediation capabilities. So it addresses all of those points. And then let's take a look here at 2201, which is all about endpoint detection and response. And this is also, EO 14028 also directs agencies to put in place a robust endpoint detection and response, or EDR solution. And this is to help shift cyber defense, from a reactive to a proactive posture. Now, we don't want to be confused with BOD 2201, but M2201 is about EDR. Okay, and so some of those objectives include an improved agency capability for early detection, response, and remediation of cyber incidents. And the next is agency enterprise level visibility across components, bureaus, and sub-agencies, okay, to be able to better detect and understand what threat activity might be out there. And then government-wide visibility through a centrally located EDR initiative. Okay, so in the case of the dashboard, that would be the federal dashboard. This would be implemented by CISA to support the host level visibility, attribution, and response across federal information systems. All right, another one that we have here is M2209, which is all about zero trust. Okay, I know a lot of agencies right now are in the midst of implementing zero trust. It's not for the faint of heart, at least from what I've heard. So, it's meant to move the federal enterprise to the zero trust architecture, this M2209. And of course, the foundational tenet is that no actor, system, network, or service operating outside or within the security perimeter is trusted. So that overall tenet really is one that must verify anything and everything. Okay, and all the traffic should be encrypted, which is outlined in 14028. And users should log into applications and not networks. And this shifts the emphasis to a stronger enterprise identity and access controls. And the memo requires agencies to achieve specific zero trust security by the end of fiscal 2024. Okay, so coming up. All right, I think that takes care of the last little bit of slides there. So at this point, I'm going to hand it back to Mike. And I think we are at the point for our lab exercises. So Mike, over to you.
All right, thanks, John. So if you recall, because Mr. Otto, we had to swap some of our sections up, so we skipped that first lab that was supposed to be a little earlier. So we are going to go back to that one. So since this is going to be the first time that we're actually doing a lab today, we're going to go ahead and make sure everybody's logged in okay. Hopefully everybody attended the tech check that needed to verify their access. But we're also going to combine that with a 10-minute break. So I know we've been going for a couple hours. Let's take a 10-minute break or so, and go ahead and make sure you get logged into the CVLE, and then we'll get you started. So maybe we can put the clock on and say let's start up at 2:15. We'll come in, make sure everybody's logged in, and get you on your way. Minutes, but I also said about 2:15, so we have about another minute before we'll get started. But just want to make sure that everybody who wants to access the CVLE and follow along and do the labs with us, that you are able to successfully get there. Veranda posted the link in the chat. But does anybody need a password reset or need help getting on? Because if not, I'm just going to skip that whole process of logging in. Hopefully everybody was at the tech check. All right, I think we're all good to go. So perfect. And I think Rhonda, I think we are recording. So yeah, let's get into it. Let me share my screen now. And for this first one, I am going to just cover some real basic things. Most of you probably already have experience with the dashboard or been to some of our other training courses. And then there might be a few of you that are brand new, but I want to just give you a couple of key pointers. So let me go ahead. Here we go. All right, so this is our CVLE page, and if you are in the CDM 220 area, just wanted to again emphasize and point out that the slides are here, the lab guides, which you'll need for these labs, are here that you can download. Supplemental docs that we talked about earlier. This is where you go to get into the range. And then at the end of the course today, most everybody usually wants their certificate of completion to show that they spent 4 hours with us. Maybe if you need it for your professional development or whatever you need it for, this is where you'll get it. But just note, before it is open to you, you will have to take a short survey to before you can access it, and it's just a few questions. So any help you give us there to help make the course better, we appreciate that. Okay, so assuming everybody got to the CDM agency dashboard, no problem. So I'm going to skip over there. Let me move this around so I can see. Okay. So again, I'm just going to give a few of the basics here. Let me go ahead and get over here. So with lab 1, I do want to point out that that there is a scenario, and a lot of times we like to include a scenario up front just so there's a reason why we're kind of clicking on stuff that you would do operationally, or hopefully something similar. And when it comes to looking for data in the dashboard, there's only so many ways to do that. And so some of it might seem kind of repetitive, and repetitiveness is good when you're trying to learn, I guess, but we'll be creating some filters. But the scenario for this first lab is the IMO has determined that some scan procedures are not being followed properly, and you've been tasked to identify the number of contractor mobile medical devices that have failed a VOL scan. Use the appropriate dashboard in the directive space to review your compliance with BOD 2301. All right, so that's that. The couple of quick notes on the dashboard are: always make sure that your date and time filter is set to at least the last 1 year. And so just click on the drop down, select last 1 year, or in either the commonly used or the recently used. Or you can, there's multiple ways again that you could do that. You could do it up here at the top in the quick select. But we just got to make sure that we are capturing all the data. And so you know that this will go down to as small a time frame as the last 30 minutes. But if we haven't captured data in the last 30 minutes, then nothing's going to populate. So just to make things easy, we just say select the last 1 year, and that grabs everything we have. Okay, and this is notional data, just like the PMO environment. This is all just notional, fictional. This does not representative of anybody out there, any agencies. So this up here, this is our breadcrumb, so you can see which dashboard you're in. So currently in agency overview. If you want to look at the main menu and get to other locations, we're typically, especially in our courses, we are in these two areas under analytics. We're going to use the Discover tool, we're going to use the dashboard, and then up at the top you can see a lot of your recently used dashboards. And then every dashboard, there's two types essentially. There's an overview dashboard and then there's a details dashboard. So the overview is going to give you a lot of generic information, totals, averages, those kind of things for your agency. And there'll be a lot of charts just to help you kind of quickly gauge and assess, so you can see at a, just a quick glimpse. All right, I got these highs. I can see, when, what time during the month, what time of the day. Kind of drill in. I can see which agencies, OUs, are the highest. So that's at a high level. Then again, there's the details dashboard, and that will start letting you drill down even further, getting further details. So, all right, I think that gives us everything we need to get started. So we'll put up 15 minutes for this first lab. And if you haven't been to one of our courses before, what we do is we'll give you the 15 minutes. You run through all the steps. Let us know in the chat if you have any issues, and one of our team members will reach out. But otherwise, I will come back on at the end of this first lab and do a quick, brisk walkthrough of all the steps and show you what I did to get the right answers for the few knowledge checks there at the end. So we'll come back and, like I said, in about 15 minutes, and we'll debrief. All right, so we are back on. Hopefully everybody had enough time to go through all the steps in this lab. Let me take this one back. Ooh. There it goes. There's where we should be. So this first lab, I'm gonna just quickly read through the scenario again, and which was the IMOs determined that some scan procedures are not being followed properly. You've been tasked to identify the number of contractor mobile medical devices that have failed a VOL scan. Use the appropriate dashboard in the directive space to review your compliance with BOD 2301. All right, so let me share. Okay, hopefully everybody sees my screen okay. Now, earlier when I did just did a quick walkthrough, I showed you how to pull down the main menu, and I mentioned that Discover and Dashboards are two main areas. But what you might have noticed here in step one was that another place that you can access some of the more recently used things, or recently spaces that are kind of common to everybody, is right here. So if you click on A, you can see there's a quick access to the directives dashboard. We could go down here to dashboards and try to go through that to go a couple levels to find the directives dashboard, but it's easy right here. So. And then, as I mentioned, it said go ahead and select last year, so we can make sure we have all the data we need for this lab exercise. Yeah, not all the images match. I know on step 3 it says there's an eye over here, but there are eyes, these eyes with circles around them next to the titles of each section, so you can hover your mouse over that and it'll kind of give you a quick glimpse, quick idea of what this chart or what this area is supposed to tell you. But we can see that there's 24,400 instances, and then it asks us to, this is kind of looking to see how this dashboard, this directives overview dashboard is laid out. And remember, I said overview dashboard is kind of more the high level. So I can see here's BOD 2201, there's 20,350. If I wanted to see ED 2004, there's 957 hits or records. So, and then if I click on any of these, it'll filter the whole view. So for example, ED 2103, I'll click on that. And now I can see that that directive ED has been applied, the filter for it. And I guess is tied to BOD 2201 as well. And then to remove it, you would just click on the X. And I'll take you back to the original view. This, I forget the name of this chart. I always want to call it a spaghetti chart. But, it's another, just a different graphical visualization to see, okay, got BOD 22.1, and that correlates to whichever system boundary over here on the right. And then you can see where a lot of them overlap. Okay, and then in step 6, it's the instances by CVE ID, and you can kind of get an idea right off the jump, right? That CVE 2020-1472 has the most out of the individual, and of course here's other that probably lumps a bunch of them together. And then our instances of software, SolarWinds, Kaspersky. Step 7 is instances by organization, so we can see quick glimpse. Pretty self-explanatory, I think, and a lot of these overview dashboards will have similar looking charts, and this one will give you a point in time graphical reference of how many instances based on date. But you can see how it trends, right? We've came down, went up a little bit. As long as we kind of see things coming down, that's always good when it comes to risk. All right. And then list of instances down here at the bottom. This is where we get a lot more kind of detail into vulnerabilities and more granular detail, I guess. But we got organization ID, host ID, vulnerability finding. We got a lot of information that we can delve into there. And then all these can, we can filter them, sort them, move them, whatever we need to do. So in step 12, one of the things it has us do is to add a filter. Filter for DHS as in the example, but so to add a filter, you can use that plus symbol, click the plus, and then we can see that it adds it. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Then on 14, we go to BOD 2301. And we scroll all the way up to the top. We see up here there's emergency directives and a list of all the EDs, and then binding operational directives. So the BOD 2301, just click on that. Again, make sure we're last 1 year. And so with this individual bod specific, they've made it so that now in this version we can easily go in and select fields and items that will help reduce our data down in a quick fashion instead of going and adding a bunch of filters. It's kind of the more common filters are already up there. You just have to select what it is that you're looking for. And yeah, and then it kind of shows you some of the, for BOD 2301 anyways, if you scroll down, you can see there's a host discovery area, vulnerability enumeration, vulnerability detection signatures, and you just get information on all these things, hosts and scans. And again, this is all related to BOD 2301. And I'm not going to go through all those with you. Just for time's sake, got an hour and 15 minutes. But on that note, I want to let y'all know that the CVLE, our range environment, will remain open. You can go in here after the course ends today. You can come back in here. It will remain open through 4 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's open for longer. But just letting you know, it will remain open. Okay, so it had us practice filtering old to new under vulnerability. The vulnerability signature detection. There it is. Yeah, so you filter on that. You can change this around, sort high to old, old to new, new to old, however you want to do that. And then the current records for looking for BOD 2301 and current records. And that is, we wanted to locate CISA, so we create a filter by clicking on the plus symbol next to CISA. And so I'm just, there's one right there. And then when you add a filter, it'll turn it yellow, so that way you know that the filter has been applied. You could also see it up here on the top left. And yeah, it's just more of adding these filters and then removing them, kind of just practicing adding and removing filters. Oh, but let me go ahead and do this, because if you recall, there's the scenario. So for CISA, yeah, we're gonna look for contractor, so we can edit the agency. And select contractor, update filter. Then we want to look for mobile device, so that would be host category. And let me go ahead and add that in. So host dot category is, and we want medical device. Oops. Yeah, I kind of got off track here. So, but yeah, you would find the medical device, hit the scan type, device scan type vol, and then hit the update, which it's not. The update is the old one too, where we've changed our environment to the 6. I think it's the 6.1 or 6.2, but it's so now it says update instead of the add filter. Another one of those small differences, but just pointing that out. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and get to the takeaways because we are running out of time. So it says, what is the number of failed vol scans for mobile medical devices? How many mobile medical devices scans were successful, and how many contractor smartphones have failed their vol scan? But because we are out of time, I'm just going to let y'all kind of go through those, and we're going to go ahead and get started on the lab 2. So we'll put up 10 minutes for lab 2 so we can try to get through this one. And I apologize for the kind of the rush on here, but let's put up lab 2, 10 minutes. All right, we are ready for lab 2. So let me go ahead and share my screen out. All right, hopefully everybody sees my screen. All right, so lab 2, the scenario on this one was the information management officer at FEMA has requested a list of the hosts with the highest critical CVE related to all BODs and EDs between November 28th and November 29th of 2023. They would like to begin remediation on the findings as soon as possible. So we're back to the directives dashboard. So let me get us back to the directives dashboard, which we are currently in. But let me go ahead and clear this. Okay. And again, we want the last year. We want to add filter. So that means clicking the blue plus. Let's go ahead and click the blue plus. Then we are we have to select the right data view, which we need the vuln current. So select that. Then we want organization ID for our field. And so once you just start typing, it should populate based on the syntax that you put in there. Then we want is, because we're looking for something specific to match that. And we specifically were looking for FEMA. And then go ahead and add filter. And then if we scroll down to list of instances, we should see everything highlighted in, under organization ID as yellow in FEMA. So that means we've applied that filter. And then it has us go ahead and do the drop down arrow next to software finding first found date. Yeah, and then once you're there, then we are, just trying to play with sorting from old to new and new to old. So that's a pretty, we just go the old to new. And then okay, so anyway, then we want to just do a filter on critical. So under the list of instances for vulnerabilities, we would look for critical. So there's a critical, we were able to find it, click the plus, and that will add the filter there. And then on step 10, we go up to the instances by CVE ID, which is this one right here. And you can see that the top one has the most, kind of like the same visualization we were showing early. But if we click on, I could just say this one right here, the second one from the top, the 1350, that applies the filter. And if we scroll down to the CVE ID down here, we can see that now we are filtered on that CVE ID right here, 1350. And then it has us go ahead and do another filter to identify the number of critical instances by a specific date. So we go ahead and do the vuln current as our data view. And then we want the vulnerability finding last found date. And so we just start typing it. Vulnerability finding last found date. And then because we're looking for a date range, we're going to select is between. And then when you do that, it gives you two options there, the start and end, and it will take a bunch of different formats, but we're just going to type it in like we see it listed in the lab guide. So 11/28/2023, and then you can tab 11/29/2023, and we'll hit, can't find my mouse, add filter. And so I click that, and we can see that we're down to now four documents. I'm just going to go and review. All right, and then if you wanted to share this with share this with somebody, you would click on the upper right of the screen. There's what's called share. So if you share, there's a couple different options here. You can share the link, but that's sharing with somebody else who has access with the dashboard. If they don't have access to the dashboard, there's other reports that you can, other ways to send them the information. So, and yeah, and there's the permalinks. And so that, yeah, when you do the permalinks under snapshot, that will, yeah, just helps you when you share it out. It'll take them right to the same thing that you see on the dashboard here. All right, so the directives overview dashboard has, you know, several different visualizations that you can, you know, like we talked about, the overview is kind of the high level. I'm going to go ahead and get into the knowledge checks again. So it says from the directives overview dashboard, which that's where we're at, delete the vulnerability finding last found date. So we'll get rid of that. Using the list of instances vulnerabilities visualization panel. So let's scroll down right here. I identify the host that has had the vulnerability the longest. So to do that, we're going to sort by old to new, right? Sort by the first found date. So make sure we're at the first found date, and then old to new. And then we just look for the one at the top. So it looks like that is host 13. And then question number 2 is modify a filter and determine how many instances of the vulnerability are present in the DHS organization. So then we are just changing FEMA to DHS, and we can go right up here to the top and click edit filter, change FEMA to DHS, and update that filter. And for that, I see 42. The third one is edit your filter set and identify the count of all vulnerabilities within FEMA with a severity rating of critical or high. So for this one, we need to delete or disable because we're looking for all vulnerabilities. So we want to go ahead and get rid of this one that we were filtered on earlier. Then again, we want to move back from DHS to FEMA. So we're just going to go ahead and edit this one again, the organization ID, change it to FEMA. And then for, because we're looking for critical or high, we need to go ahead and change this one because it's currently set to critical. So edit filter. And then we want to change this to is one of, and then we can select our critical and select our high, hit the update. And so we can see that how many hits we have there, instances. And again, you know, these questions, knowledge checks are kind of written generically. You know, we're not going to have certain specific answers, but kind of help guide you to where to find those answers. And then the last one here from the directives overview dashboard, use the list of instances software visualization panel, determine how many instances of software violations are present in the FEMA organization. And we're looking for all violations, so we can get rid of that. And so now we see we have 2,858 And when it said to look at the list of instances software, and so if we, oh, actually, so the list of instances software, we have 144 documents there. All right, so with that, I'm gonna stop sharing and hand things over to John to cover the last one, the last lab.
All right, thank you, sir. So let me get back here where we need to be. There we go. All right. Okay, so this last lab, we're going to be identifying known exploited vulnerabilities. The scenario is you've been asked to determine if there are any critical KEV vulnerabilities that have not been remediated on system boundary 11. And to do this, you'll need to use your CDM agency dashboard to filter for information within your agency, which is the contractor agency. Okay, so identify the KEVs and create a report that can be shared with management. So that's where we're headed. And let's take, since you guys are old pros at the dashboard, let's go ahead. We'll set the clock for 15 minutes. I think we can debrief this pretty quickly. So that should give you more than enough time to make it through the lab. So let's put 15 minutes on the clock. We'll see you back at 3:30 and we'll do our debrief. All right, welcome back. So let's take a look here at lab number 3. I'll go ahead and share out my screen here so we can have a look. Okay, so hopefully everyone managed to get back onto the agency dashboard space from step number 1. So I'm sorry I didn't remind you of that before we started the lab. I didn't think about that. But anyway, we're back on the agency dashboard space. We're using the Discover tool, and we're in the CDM Vuln Current data view. And so what I've done on step number 5 is I've already loaded these up. I didn't think you really needed to see me select these out of a list. So they're all here. All those that you see there in step number 5. And I don't know if Mike showed you this or not. There's a little icon right over here on the left that says hide sidebar. And if you hide that, you get a little more real estate here to view the document table. And if you want it back, you just click it again and it brings back the sidebar. Okay, so, all right, so with step number 5, we have all of our attributes listed here. I'm going to go ahead and close this so we can get a little more space. The first thing it wants us to do is create a filter for the FVA status. Okay, now if you remember, our FVA status is right here. It's the first one. Okay, and it wants us to select true for our FVA status. Now here's the thing, remember we're looking for KEVs. Every KEV has an FVA status. Okay, so that's why we want to select true for our first operation here. Okay, so that takes us through step 9. And step 10 says we're going to create 4 different filters. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first 2 and then we'll do the second 2. All right, so within the contractor organization on system boundary 11. So the first thing it wants us to do is find the vulnerabilities that have not been remediated. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to find vulnerability finding remediated, which is the second column right here. Okay, and we're going to hover over false because these are the ones that have not been fixed, right? So we're going to say false. We'll use our shortcut. Now I call it a shortcut because it's just that. it works great in the training environment. We don't have a lot of data here, but sometimes it's hard to find things to use the shortcut. So sometimes it's just easier to come up here and do an add filter, okay, rather than scrolling through and trying to find the value that you need, okay. All right, so that brings us to step number 11, where we're going to create a filter for contractors. So organization ID we have right here, and I don't see contractor offhand. So there it is, my point exactly. We're just going to come up here and we're going to create a filter. And we're going to say organization ID. So I'll just type in org is, because we want a specific outcome, is contractor. And we'll add the filter. Okay. And now we're filtering for all the KEVs in contractor. Okay. So the other thing that it wants us to do here, it wants us to create two more filters. One is system boundary ID 11, and we can use our shortcut because right here at the top is SB11. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then the next thing is the vulnerability finding CVE severity of critical. And we can use our shortcut for that since it's right here. Okay. So there you go. Now there's all of our filters. We're looking at all of the critical KEVs for the contractor organization and system boundary 11. Okay, so that only took just a few filters to put in place, and we're able to now see that. So at this point on step 13, it wants you to save off the search. I'll go ahead and do this, I guess. Give it a meaningful title, something that you can relate to later. So I'll, in the interest of time, I'll CDM 220. All right, and always give it a description. That way, whoever's coming behind you can know what it is. So I'll go ahead and save this off. And you'll notice up here in this little breadcrumb, you'll see that we have now Lab 2 CDM 220 JCS, which is our report. Okay, and at this point, it's directing you step 14 to do CBS reports, so we can share it out. We can do a get links, which is basically permalinks, and you can do a snapshot or a saved object. A snapshot is just that; it's a moment in time. Okay, a saved object is it's dynamic, so each time you run the report, it will update, give you the updated information. A CSV report is basically when you run a CSV report, it creates an Excel spreadsheet, which you can see there in step 15. You just download the report, and then you're able to view the CSV file in Excel, and you can use Excel functions to manipulate the data. It's a great way if your colleagues don't have access to the dashboard. You can create a CSV file and send it to them that way. If you do a permalinks, and I think Mike mentioned this, you want to make sure that your recipient has the proper permission to run that report and look at that report. Otherwise, the link won't work for them. So just keep that in mind. Okay, that brings us to our knowledge checks. So let's take a look here at knowledge check number 1. It says close the Excel report. I didn't open the Excel report, so we're good there. It says with the existing filters in place, modify your report and determine the greatest number of days these critical vulnerabilities have been active in the contractor organization and system boundary 11. All right, so if you recall, we have a vulnerability finding days active column, which is right here. Okay, and you notice as I hover over these column headings, it gives you a little pop-up, which is the full name of the column. That way, some of these are quite long, so that way you don't have to remember it. But what we want to do now is we just want to sort this from high to low. That's all we need to do. Okay, and that will give you the greatest number of days. Okay, which in this case looks like there's I don't know, 3, 4 or 5 that are 149. Okay, so that's all we need to do for number 1. Number 2, modify your filters and determine how many remediated vulnerabilities across all severity levels were last found in the contractor organization and system boundary 11 between November 25th and November 28th, 2023. Okay, so let's break this down. How many remediated vulnerabilities? So right now we're looking at vulnerabilities that are not remediated. So let's go ahead and edit this. We're going to say edit filter. We're going to say vulnerability finding remediated is true. Okay, because we're looking for the ones that are fixed now. Okay, notice that that changes our column here to true. All right, next we have across all severity levels. Okay, so right now we have severity level of critical. So all we have to do is temporarily disable this filter. Okay, and I'll just click on temporarily disable. And that's the same as deleting it, but it's kind of nice because you might use it again. So it keeps it up there, but it's not affecting any of your search results or any of your filters, okay, because it's disabled. All right, and the next thing we need to do is we need to put in that date range. Okay, so we're going to go here and we're going to create a filter. And we're going to say vulnerability finding last found date. So I'm just going to type in last, see what comes up. Okay, there we go, vulnerability finding last found date right here at the bottom. We're going to say is between because we're looking for a date range. And we're going to say 11/25/2023 to 11/28/2023. All right, and we're going to say add filter. Okay, and that gives us the number of documents, looks like it's 15 here in this case, that were remediated within all severity levels within that date range. Okay, so between November 25th and November 28th. All right, number 3, modify your filters and determine how many vulnerabilities across all severity levels have been remediated in the CBP organization for system boundary 16. All right, so it wants to know how many vulnerabilities across all severity levels. So right now we're filtered for this 3-day range here. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of that. Okay. Then we're going to modify the organization ID from contractor to CBP and update the filter. And then we're going to modify the system boundary ID to system boundary 16. Okay, now notice it's not in the list here. So what we can do is just type it in. And you'll see it pops up here. Update the filter. And there we go. Okay, so that's all we needed to do to change our organization and our system boundary basically. Okay. All right. Next, we want to start with the current filter set and determine how many vulnerabilities were designated with a severity level of high or critical for the CBP organization on system boundary 16. Okay, now I know you guys know how to do this. So what we have to do is edit this filter. Remember, we temporarily disabled it, so we can edit it even though it's disabled. So we'll go ahead and edit it. and we're going to say is one of. Okay, you probably remember this from your other labs, and we're going to say high and critical. And we'll update the filter. And then once we do that, we can go and re-enable the filter. Okay. And that will give us all the high and critical vulnerability, all the high and critical vulnerabilities that are out there. Okay. All right. So hopefully you were able to finish that lab. Now, if not, I know in the chat pod, actually, let me stop sharing here and get us back to where we need to be. Okay. So I noticed in the chat pod, I think someone put in the date and time that the CVLE will be available, and that will be through I think it's tomorrow at 4 p.m. Could be even longer, but if you would like, you can jump in there tomorrow. Yes, there we go. Thank you, Veranda, 6:21 at 4 p.m. Jump back in here. You would log in the exact same way you did today. Rerun your labs if you want to do that. Just click around, see what you can learn, but take advantage of that. Yes, Kevin, Eastern Time. Thank you for asking. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mike. He's got some information on vulnerability response. So Mike, over to you.
All right, thanks, John. And now we're pushing up on the time, so try and get through these next few slides quickly. So, we've talked about the BODs and the ED process from creation and basically making its way to us at the agencies, and we're using the dashboard to help us locate where these vulnerabilities are, whether they're KEVs or some other vulnerability. But but what do we do from there? The vulnerability response process employs standard vulnerability management programs that include phases for identifying, analyzing, remediating, and reporting vulnerabilities. So this illustration right here describes or shows you the vulnerability response process in terms of a standard vulnerability management program. So proactively identifying reports of vulnerabilities that are actively exploited in the wild by monitoring threat feeds and information sources is one of the primary activities of the CISA threat hunters. The U.S. CERT National Cyber Awareness System, NCAS, that provides a weekly bulletin containing vulnerability summaries, and NIST National Vulnerability Database, the NVD, shows vulnerabilities that are being exploited in the wild. So I'm gonna put a couple of links again, and that you can check out. So that is that on that kind of standard process. And then remediation best practices that we have here. So what you see on the slide is a list based on best practices. Some of these bullets may fall within the recommended checks and reviews that you probably already have in place at your agency. You might have specific requirements or issues that your agency wants emphasized in addition to kind of general routine activities. And there may be specific vulnerabilities that require waivers or special circumstances, or that will need to be reported on a more frequent basis. So all this goes into the process for remediating discrepancies. In all, you want to monitor and respond to discrepancies when they arise, properly, configure your endpoints, establish a good battle rhythm, and then use the dashboard to identify those worst problems first, and then respond accordingly. All right, now Got a few slides left, and I'm trying to get my mouse to work over here. There we go. So yeah, on the conclusion part, kind of got our standard. You've probably seen this in our other courses, and we need to get this updated. But essentially, the road ahead, this is a evolving process, right? The dashboard, we're continuing to learn, continuous improvement process, getting better, getting from a kind of reactionary state to more of a threat-based response posture, and so it's not, anyway, it kind of helps fit better with the broader CISA charter and on-demand cyber services that agencies need and want. So that's that in a nutshell. And this slide. So, we've covered quite a bit of ground the last few hours to include the process that directives go through in order to become operational. Along with that, we looked at some of the most current mandates, and we used the dashboard to identify KEVs, right? Known exploited vulnerabilities. And then we also looked at vulnerability response procedures and some of the best practices to remediate vulnerabilities when they arise. So now I'll hand it back to John. And yeah, thanks everybody for attending the course today. So over to you, John. John's going to talk about some of the resources we got available for additional training resources.
All right, thanks, Mike. So let's take a look here at this page. Now I want to encourage you to take the slides with you today because there are some good links in here, this slide in particular, so you can have some of these links with you available. And I think there's some links in the chat also that we posted, so be sure and take a look at those or copy those out or whatever you need to do. But there's also a lot of documentation in the CBLE that pertains to today's course. So again, take a look there and just use what you will, download what you will, and nix the rest, whatever works for you. So, but again, take the slides with you today. There's some great links, and all you have to do is click them to access the site. So, all right. So we have some courses coming up. We have a manager's course coming up here in, I think it's next week actually. So if you are in a management position or executive position, this is a great course for you to attend to get some overview information. We also have the CDM 142 and 141 coming up later in the month of July. So those are great introductory courses. So if you know someone who needs to get acquainted with the dashboard, those are a great place to start. We have some microlearn videos. I'm going to show you those here coming up real quick. And then we also, Joe mentioned this during the intro this morning, or this afternoon, that we have YouTube videos. I think we have 5 videos posted on the YouTube channel, the CISA YouTube channel. And we are continuing to post those as they become available. So take a look at the CISA YouTube channel. All right. Give me a thumbs up. How many of you feel a little better about the dashboard than you did a few hours ago? Now that you've had a chance to take a look at it, get your hands on it. All right. Lots of thumbs up. That's what I like to see. Excellent. Okay, so I feel like we've kind of accomplished something then. That way you have something you can take with you, hopefully. But where do you go from here? continue to get familiar with the dashboard. As with anything, the more time and the more practice you put into it, the more familiar you're going to be with it. As Joe mentioned, we offer a variety of courses. I'm going to show you where those are here in just a second, so that you can register for those. We also have a notifications. Let me pop this link into the chat for you. This is a link where you can sign up for notifications for our course. You just enter some basic information, and then you'll be provided a list of courses that you would like to be notified about, and you'll want to be able to, or you want to be sure to select Agency Dashboard Training Program. Okay. All right, and as I mentioned, the cyber range will be available through tomorrow at 4 o'clock Eastern. So take advantage of that resource. Please do that. Okay. What I want to do now is just quickly share out my screen. Let me get to the right place here because I want to show you where you can register for courses. Share web browser. Okay. This is the CISA Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Training site. And if you scroll down, and this link, the link to this site is on that slide that we were just looking at. So again, be sure and take them with you. CDM Cyber Range Training, this is basically just an overview, little overview here of each of the courses. So if I click on CDM 220, you can see that there's a little blurb there that tells you about it. But upcoming training events, this is what I wanted to show you. This is where you'll come to sign up for upcoming events. Okay, right now we are at BOD 22, or yeah, BOD, or CDM 220, excuse me. So this gets updated every couple of weeks or so, and the old stuff gets taken down and new stuff gets put up. So be sure and check it often. Our next course is CDM 301. And then toward the end of July, we have the in-person course. So we'd love to have you in the in-person course if you're in the Northern Virginia area. All right, virtual learning training environment, or FedVTE. Hopefully you all have a FedVTE account. If you don't, I want to encourage you to sign up for one. Lots of good stuff on there. So let me just show you where the CDM stuff is real quick. I'll give that a second to pop up. There we go. All right, and if you notice right here, there's like a menu bar here across the top. Okay, and there's CDM courses. We have Dashboard Elastic courses. These are recordings of the courses that we teach. So you can come here and go through them. For example, here's CDM 220. If you want to review any material that was covered, you can come here and do that. There's no hands-on labs, unfortunately. It's just lab demonstrations, but great place to come and get an overview of the course. And then we have the microlearn courses as well, and we are always creating new ones and updating things, so be sure and take a look at this site. All sorts of different topics here, so if you're new to the dashboard, this is a great place to come and get some basic information. I think these videos are, I think the longest one is 40 minutes. They all range between 15 and 20 minutes, so it's very easy to take in. So just wanted to show you that. Let's get back here. And here are the links again for the FedVTE and also the CISA training site. The other thing I wanted to share with you is the knowledge base. There is an email address here that you can contact for access. But I would recommend that you start with your agency CDM POC, because they'll know what you need, and they can probably help you, at least request the correct access. So I would start with them. And then as you determine what you need, send in an email. But lots of good information on this site as well. All right, points of contact, all things training is Cyber Insights at cisa.dhs.gov. Any questions about the training, certificates, registration, please direct them to Cyber Insights. Joe Bukovac is our CDM training team lead, and he's always interested to hear your feedback. So, please feel free to contact him directly at the email you see here. CDM program office questions, those are for the larger CDM questions, but you can contact them directly at cdm@cisa.dhs.gov. And then lastly, we have the FedVTE link and as well as the knowledge base support. So, and with that, I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to just take a moment to turn it back over to Joe, who's got a few parting words for us. So again, thanks everyone. We appreciate your time. And Joe, over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. And thanks everyone for attending today. As John said, I'm Joe Bukovac. And you heard from me earlier today introducing Mike and John. And I want to thank them both for doing a fantastic job as always for presenting the material, walking through the labs and the material. And also, this is a rare class where we have guest speakers. Only our in-person classes or the other training events where we have speakers. So I want to thank Judy Balzenberger and Dave Otto for their excellent presentations and Judy's demonstration today. And I also want to remind you to complete the feedback, as John and Mike have mentioned. So go into the learning environment and complete the evaluation. And then once you do that, you'll be able to download your certificate, and you have 72 hours to do that to get your certificate. And your comments are very important to us as we develop and new courses. Actually, in September, we have a brand new HVA tracking course that we're going to debut. And then also updating all our other CDM courses, including this one. So we're hoping to update this course. Your feedback will really help us as we start to make changes and make this an even better course for you all. So really enough said. I want to thank you again for attending. And on behalf of the training team, we look forward to seeing you at future training events. Have a great day and weekend. Bye-bye.